We'll just jump right in to the first, which is the Mount Olive AME Church. Mount Olive AME Church, the first sanctuary of this church was a small wooden structure constructed on the site in 1887. And by 1920, the congregation had outgrown the church. A.L. Lewis, who was the building committee chairman, selected plans drawn by Richard L. Brown, who was Jacksonville's first black architect, who died in 1948 at the age of 94. Those of you that know Jacksonville history will remember that Mr. Lewis was also an influential business leader and the founder of the Afro-American Life Insurance Company, as well as American Beach. Mr. Brown designed an eclectic building of concrete blocks, ornate texture on the basement level, rough cut to simulate quarry stones on the upper 2 stories. A declining congregation, infrastructure issues, and a developer encroachment are threats to the future viability of this historical church, which celebrates its own centennial this year. Our next building is the Snyder Memorial Methodist Church, which is right downtown. Originally known as the Trinity Methodist Episcopal Church, this church is across from City Hall and a fine example of Gothic Revival architecture. Built in 1902 to 1903, it was one of the first churches to be built following the 1901 fire. Designed by architect J.H.W. Hawkins, its exterior features detailed carved stones and outstanding stained glass windows. It's more, not recent anymore, but one of its historical events in its history. It's known for Axe Handle Saturday. The church became a refuge for black civil rights demonstrators under attack during that sad day. It is owned by the city of Jacksonville, but has remained vacant for most of the last decade. And an editorial comment, it is a shame that it's sitting there basically falling apart through neglect. This is the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, Calvary, excuse me. We're located at 301 Spruce Street. Mount Calvary Baptist Church began in the Brooklyn neighborhood in 1892, again as a one-story wooden building, built on this site for its African-American congregation. The building remained unchanged for 50 years when the church's 9th pastor, Reverend William Hill, arrived in 1942. Reverend Hill envisioned a grand building that would reflect the role of the church as an anchor for the Brooklyn community. He asked black architect James Edward Hutchins to design the new church, and it was constructed by craftsmen who were members of the congregation led by a contractor, Tom Thompson. Completed in 1949, this Gothic Revival brick sanctuary with twin square towers served the congregation for another 50 years, until it moved from Brooklyn to a new location in 1999. The building has been vacant ever since, and is the largest remaining building for Brooklyn's historic black community, and finding an adaptive reuse for this building is a big priority. Wesley Manor, which is now known as Westminster Woods, located on State Road 13 in St. Johns County, designed by famous Jacksonville architect Bob Brown, was his largest commission of his career and one of the most innovative. Wesley Manor is an important example of the mid-century modern style of architecture practiced by Mr. Broward and his contemporaries in Jacksonville. Built as a senior living facility, attended to the needs of its residents, the original buildings have no need for stairs or are one story, and have works of art by local artists throughout the facility. Unfortunately, a St. Johns County PUD from 2015 calls for the demolition and replacement of nearly all the Broward structures with what you're seeing popping up all over the place. Now, this will be a shame if this thing ends up actually getting torn down. But that PUD is in effect. My understanding is it's going to go forward, but there's no timeline. Fleming Bowden residence on Loretta Road. Fleming Bowden residence is on property currently zoned for a subdivision. The Mandarin Historic Society has been negotiating with developers to save the historic two-story original portion of the house. The developers have not ruled out moving the house to a location across Retina Road where that property owner has room for a multi-acre lot and has expressed an interest in receiving the home. Plan B would be to move the two-story portion of the home to a lot near the front of the subdivision and offer it for sale. However, the developers, while they express interest, have not definitely agreed to do either one to date. Fairbanks Road residences. There's 2 houses on this site. These 2 homes on Fairbanks Road are shown on an 1885 LeBaron map. They are part of a proposed development that, when rezoning is approved, will be lost. Both homes will be impossible to move since Kennedy Lane, the access to Retina Road, is barely 1 car wide. 3301 Fairbanks, which is the top house, is a farmhouse with 2-tiered veranda and chamfered wooden posts. 3318 Fairbanks, on the bottom, shows an interesting variation of style among the remaining Mandarin farmhouses. The steeply pitched roof provides usable living space in the attic, while the porch roof is not connected to the main roof. That's not a usual way of these things ever being built. So that's kind of what makes that a little bit special. The Victorian duplexes on Jefferson Street. Many of you have seen these buildings. They have basically been in this state for many, many years. These 2-story twin duplexes were built in 1906 according to the property appraiser's office. Demonstrating the persuasive influence of this Queen Anne style, the angled 2-tier balconies and octagonal cupolas, gabled roofs and decorative shingles, siding, plaster, stucco walls, and soft pine flooring turned rather ordinary frame buildings into very charming structures at the turn of the 20th century. Usable space is approximately 870 square feet per floor, and these buildings have been owned by the Clara White Mission since 2014. The post-Civil War cottage on 328 Chelsea Street. That's how it started. That's what it looks like today. A large contingent of black Union soldiers came to Jacksonville in 1864 during the town's 4th occupation of the Civil War. A garrison of both white and black federal soldiers were stationed in Brooklyn for several years, and after the war as part of the military occupation to restore order. In 1868, Miles Price, for which Price Street is named, planted Brooklyn and began selling lots. Some of the black Union veterans remained and returned to lives in this neighborhood and were joined by other former slaves, making the northwestern portion of Brooklyn a black residential community. This is the last of numerous 2- and 3-room small wooden cottages constructed after the war in this part of Brooklyn, providing an important link to Jacksonville's Reconstruction era. And the Villa shotgun homes. These also have been sitting there for many, many years. The city spent over $100,000 to move these houses to the location where they currently sit. These shotgun houses were under construction near the Cleveland fiber factory when the Great Fire broke out on May 3rd, 1901. They were damaged by the fire but survived. These 3 survivors represent a distinctive architectural style and are stored for future restoration, yet they are in rapidly deteriorating condition. Working people lived in these practical 1-story homes in which one could literally shoot a shotgun right down the long hallway and out the front door, hence the name. Basically, everything all the rooms were on one side, the hallway just goes right down the side. The Dr. Horace Drew Mansion in Springfield. Dr. Horace R. Drew, a physician and grandson of Jacksonville pioneer Columbus Drew, was the first owner and occupant of this house around 1909. The exotic resident exhibits one of the most inventive uses of concrete blocks as a building material in Jacksonville. The eclectic design borrows elements from the Tudor Revival, Queen Anne, and Spanish colonial revival styles. In architectural parlance, we call that eclectic. It is one of the most significant residences in the Springfield Historic District. In recent years, it has been badly deteriorated. 245 West 3rd Street LLC was in the process of restoring the Drew Mansion overlooking Clutho Park. but little has been done over several years. In fact, I don't think anything's been done over several years in the current state in which it sits. Bertha M. White Youth Recreation Center. This building was originally built in 1938 as a residence. In the bungalow architectural style, the building included two adjacent columns with Corinthian capitals, reportedly rescued from the demolished downtown building. The structure includes gently pitched gable roofs, the use of native materials such as coquina, and simple round columns. The original structure has been expanded at least 3 times, with the largest and latest in 1972 to provide a recreation room for the Boys Club. In 1993, the Planning Department and the Jacksonville Historic Preservation Commission found that the property met the minimum 2 out of 7 National Register criteria for landmark. Those criteria are: number 3, that it was associated with a person or persons who were significant in the development of the city or nation, in this case, Miss Bertha Mary Magdalene White; and number 7, its suitability for preservation or restoration. It is also one of few buildings and houses remaining from the period when Moncrief Springs was a popular resort for African American communities. Claude Nolan Cadillac Building. I don't know if there's anybody around that remembers it, but it used to look like that. This building was built in 1912 as an important prairie-style building designed by architect Henry John Clutho for Claude Nolan, who started this Cadillac dealer in 1907. He was one of the city's most well-known innovators. In addition to founding the oldest automobile business in Jacksonville, Mr. Nolan is also credited with originating the idea of selling automobiles on installments in 1910, a practice that was soon adopted by the entire automobile industry. Originally, this Cadillac showroom building had a projecting cornice, large plate glass windows, and a bold interplay of horizontal and vertical lines. Although the drastic remodeling in 1948 completely obscured the original facade, a little piece of trivia here, Joel McKeeshan calls that the art moderne style. And believe it or not, it is now historic in its own right, so go figure. Although the drastic, however, the state's passed a goal of a coal gasification plant that was in that vicinity may affect plans for future redevelopment, just because of all the toxic stuff that's underground. And I know it's exactly a Superfund site, but the cleanup costs on that site are going to be expensive, which is probably one reason why it's sitting there. Although with everything that's happening in Springfield along Main Street, maybe there's hope that a white knight who just has to restore that building will come along and do it. Mr. Donlan. The Jack's Brewing Company. In 1913, German-born William Osner, a brewer from St. Louis, moved to Jacksonville to start his own brewery at West 16th Street near Myrtle Street. It was the second brewery ever opened in the state, and the popularity of Osner's Jack's beer resulted in a great expansion of his beer manufacturing facility over several years. Anticipating the repeal of nationwide prohibition, the Jacksonville Brewing Company began preparing months ahead of time. As a result, it was ready to begin selling beer within a week after the 21st Amendment was ratified on December 5, 1933, once again legalizing the sale of frosty malt adult beverages. Ford Motor Company Assembly Plant. Built in 1924, the Ford Motor Company's assembly plant is situated on a long quay that protrudes out into the river and is supported by 8,000 piles. It is one of over 1,000 buildings designed for Henry Ford by Albert Kahn, the internationally recognized industrial architect. Considering how long ago that was, the Albert Kahn & Associates firm is still around and is still a very large firm with a national and international practice, so they're still doing this stuff. Among the building's most striking features are its enormous skylight panels, which extend several hundred feet in length, providing natural lighting and heat to the interior. Also, the sides of the building were made largely of glass. Ford Motor Company occupied the site until the late 1960s, and it is in severely deteriorated condition. A good example of how it could be restored is the Ford Motor Company assembly plant in Richmond, California, which is larger than this but similar in design and type, was successfully adapted as part of the Rosie the Riveter World War II Homefront National Historic Park. One of the really interesting things about this structure, and it's difficult to get in, but if you ever get a chance to get in, it's really interesting. Albert Kahn designed this building with a completely open floor plate. There's no walls, there's no rooms, there's no nothing on the manufacturing floor. Everything is elevated. All the restrooms and locker rooms and all that sort of support stuff is elevated above and hanging from the structure above it, which was revolutionary at the time. It made it an extremely flexible facility to be used, which was really kind of cool. The unfortunate part about this structure, and I'm digressing from the program a little bit, but that piece of the building that sticks out on, I guess it's the right-hand third of it, that piece was the addition, and it sits entirely over the water. That's the part of the building that's in extremely poor condition. The pilings are collapsing, and all the concrete bulkheads around it are settling. And if you drive over the Matthews Bridge, if you look closely, there's a piece of the north side clerestory monitor windows that you can actually see the structure is starting to sag. And so that piece of the building is probably not salvageable, but the balance of it could very well be. The Universal Marion Building, which is soon to be the former headquarters of JEA, is one of the masterpieces of downtown Jacksonville's mid-century modern architecture. It was built in 1963 and designed by Ketchum & Sharp, a prominent New York architectural firm. The original major tenant was the Universal Marion Company of Miami, which owned 2 Florida newspapers and made movies through a subsidiary. Ivy's department store occupied much of the 2 lower floors. The 19-story skyscraper was the tallest building on the North Bank at the time of its construction and the second highest in the city after the old Prudential building. It featured a revolving restaurant on the top floor called the Embers, and the building's distinctive hexagonal honeycomb windows make it highly recognizable on the city skyline. And the JEA will vacate this building later as it moves to its new headquarters. Up there on the top, the turntable of the Embers restaurant is all still there. The mechanism has all been removed and shut down, and it doesn't turn anymore, and it's been built, so if you walk up there, you don't know it, it's just a big floor. But the turntable is still in there, so if somebody was ambitious in that case, it could also be revived. The old Duval County Armory. Completed in 1916, the Army for the local National Guard troops was designed by architects Talley and Summer. The building is monumental and fortress-like, with battlement towers and parapets and a dramatic arched entrance at the center of the facade. A carved stone shield with the emblem of the Florida National Guard tops the central pavilion. The name of the Duval County Armory was changed in 1962 to the Maxwell G. Snyder Armory, honoring the commanding general of the National Guard's 48th Armored Division. In 1973, the building became the City of Jacksonville's Parks and Recreation Department when the Armory was relocated to what was then its new home over on Craig Field Park, which is now also gone as they moved that Armory out to Cecil Field, but a little hopscotch around. In 2010, the department relocated to the Ed Ball building, leaving the Armory abandoned for the first time in history. Downtown Investment Authority has recently issued a request for proposal to elicit redevelopment ideas. One of its challenges is it's right up against a creek, and that creek floods a lot, and the lower level of that floor has water issues, and it's going to take quite a bit to put it back in operation. But the building is structurally sound. The thing's built like a bomb shelter. And it's a great building. It's a shame to see it just sitting there. There's got to be a use for it, and I'm confident that something is going to happen. Genevars Hall. That's its current condition. That's what it used to be. Sebastian Genevar constructed this building around 1895 to house his grocery business and later a saloon. Its location at the intersection of Ashley and Jefferson Street was the heart of nightlife for La Villa's African-American community during the 20s and 30s jazz era. A lot of famous people played in that place. About 1931, Wynn's Hotel opened in this building and was a favorite lodging place for visiting entertainers such as Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Dizzy Gillespie, and Ray Charles. Following a lien placed against a fraternity who applied for a state grant, it is owned by the city of Jacksonville. The building has been gutted, although much of its original walls are still intact. It's significant as a pre-1901 fire structure as well as a landmark from the swing time music era of Black Jacksonville makes this building in urgent need of restoration. There's really not a whole lot left in the original building. Those brick walls are there. That steel structure was inserted around it to help support it all. It's just a sad state of affairs to have it sitting there like that, considering what is represented by that site. We've got a lot of schools that are in danger, folks. The Annie Lytle Public School, number 4, 1011 Peninsula Place. Originally built in 1917 and designed by architect Rutledge Holmes, PS number 4 overlooked Riverside Park before construction of I-95 and I-10 interchange. The dominant architectural feature of the school is a neoclassical pediment portico supported by colossal Doric columns at the entrance. Vacant since the 70s, the building has been threatened by demolition many times, even though it has been declared a historic landmark. The Annie Lytle Preservation Group has waged a brave fight to stabilize the building until an adaptive reuse of the building can be found. As time goes by, it's falling apart more and more every day. A large part of that building, its central auditorium, has no roof on it anymore. It is, for all practical purposes, becoming a modern urban ruin in a classic ruin sense, because basically anything that's wood is just about gone out of that building. Special category, historic and architecturally significant Duval public school buildings slated for demolition as part of the sales tax bond issue, expanding the system. First one, Annie R. Morgan Elementary School. The next one is Brentwood Elementary School, built in 1915. Henry Kite Elementary School, built in 1929. It was named for Henry F. Kite, who served as the school principal from 1930 to 1960, and the school was renamed in his honor in 1964. Matthew Gilbert Middle School, which has a very long history, opened as the Franklin Street Public School number 146 in 1927 for black students through the 8th grade. Eastside School served as a high school from 1951 to 1971 when it became a middle school. Notable alumni include Henry Lee Adams Jr., the first African-American judge in the Middle District of Florida, and Bob Hayes, Olympic sprinter, NFL wide receiver, and the only athlete to win both an Olympic gold medal and a Super Bowl ring from Jacksonville. Ortega Elementary School was built in 1923 as PS number 16, designed by Henry Clutho in the Mediterranean revival style, replacing the original school building from circa 1914. And now we get to what we like to call the fun part, success stories. Things are changing, folks. People are seeing the value of historic structures, and I'm happy to say a lot of it's happening downtown. As Alan discussed earlier, the old Hayden Burns Library, which was designed by T.L. Hardwick, literally is a poster child for historic preservation because it is literally a love it or hate it building. People that love it passionately love it. Those that hate it can't stand that thing and wish it was gone. But that's what it's all about. It sparks discussion about our history and what we have in our city. It's now the Jesse Goldberg Pound Center. Former Hayden Burns Library was built in 1965 at a cost of $3.7 million. This is an example of what inflation has done. That building today would probably cost 15 to 20 times that. It was considered state-of-the-art. 126,000 square feet, the three-story building was designed by local architect Taylor Hardwick and served library patrons until it closed in 2005. The building originally, it's 3 stories, and it has a basement. It was originally designed for a second basement that never got built, and it was designed to add a 4th floor, which ultimately also never got built. The ground floor has floor-to-ceiling windows to allow pedestrians to view the library activity. Exterior walls facing Ocean and Adams Street have 88 fins extending from the second floor to the roof like the 88 keys on the piano. And you all know the story of Sharon McGill at the Jesse Gold DuPont Fund, who purchased the structure and renovated it to what it is today. The next building is Elena Flats on 122 East Duval Street. Built in 1909, Elena Flats is one of the last historic structures in what was once a vibrant downtown rooming house district after the Great Fire of 1901. Initially catering to middle-class workers, the Elena Flats building was later converted to a rooming house for Jones College students in the 1950s. By the late 70s, the building had subdivided into as many as 25 rooms. There actually are 25, I counted them. Over the next several decades, the building began to deteriorate from a lack of maintenance. It was last used as a nightly and weekly rental house in the early 2000s. It was shut down, it was condemned by the city because it was literally falling apart. Investors Jack Meeks and Joanne Tredenick bought the building in 2015, and after spending nearly $3 million in securing historic tax credits, the building has been restored, renovated, and opened up again as its original use as a 4-unit apartment building. And yes, that was Melody's project. Calford Chop House, the Bostwick building. This building has a real colorful history in how it got saved, but we'll take that offline if anybody's interested. Built it for the first national bank in 1902, expanded in 1919 by the Guaranteed Trust and Saving Bank. After several bank failures, the Bostwick family bought the building in the 1930s. Mr. Clutho had his architectural office there in the building from 1944 to 1960. I have a picture of that sign. It was still on the wall over there. It was all banged up and barely legible in 1981 when I moved to Jacksonville. I got a picture of that somewhere. I got to find it. In 2013, the property owners were behind in taxes and requested approval for demolition. The city of Jacksonville won a foreclosure suit to force the sale of the building, which was bought by the Forking Amazing Restaurant Group in 2014. And after many years and much more money than Shot Club wanted to spend, we now have the Calford Chop House. You have to sell a lot of steaks to pay that. But we're glad he did it because it's an incredible structure. John Gorey Junior High School, now the John Gorey Condominium. Named for the inventor of mechanical cooling, the John Gorey Junior High was built in 1923 by architects Greeley and Benjamin. Listed in both the local and national registers of historic places, it was unoccupied beginning in the 70s and officially closed in 1997. The Mediterranean-style structure was neglected until 2009 when Dolores Marr Weaver bought the building and began a 2-year restoration, renovation, and adaptive reuse during the former classrooms of the spacious residential condominiums. In 2012, the project won an award for outstanding multifamily renovation for Riverside Avondale preservation, recognizing the work of Mrs. Weaver's Gordon's Castle, the contractor, and Rob Overley, the architect. The Seminole Building, Sweet Peas. Built in 1903 by Rutledge Holmes and Arthur Gillis. The building operated for decades as the Seminole Club, a private downtown men's club. It was renovated in 1975 when elevators were added. Closed in 1989, and again it was reopened and again in 2004. Then designated as a historic structure in 2006. After the 2007 economic recession, the building remained unused until it was purchased in 2014 by reality television host Marcus Lemonis for $550,000. The 22,000 square foot building was renovated, including conversion of an old basketball court into a candy production area. The structure currently houses the Sweet Pete's Candy Company and a restaurant. It was bought in 2020 for $1.7 million by JWB Real Estate. As part of Alex's urban renewal and historic preservation empire. Alex Safakis, if you don't know, is one of the biggest champions and developer who's putting his money where his mouth is in restoring and reusing a lot of historic buildings in Jacksonville. The Barnett Bank Building. Building was designed by New York architectural firm in the middle of Jacksonville building boom. Finished in 1926, it became Jacksonville's tallest building at 18 stories. 2013, Southeast Development Group acquired the building along with the Laura Street Trio and began rehabilitation in 2017. Finished in 2 years, the $53 million project houses a commercial bank, a local newspaper, and downtown campus of the University of North Florida, and rental apartments. Brewster Hospital. The Brewster Hospital building was originally constructed as a private residence for Hans Christian Peters, a Jacksonville meal cutter and dealer in 1885. The hospital's name came from Mrs. George A. Brewster, an early contributor to the first hospital for African Americans in Jacksonville in 1901. The building was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1976, having been vacant since 1966. In 2005, the city of Jacksonville moved the building from 915 West Monroe Street to its current site and spent $1.2 million in rehabilitation for new use. In 2020, the North Florida Land Trust became its primary tenant. Now we talk about, a lot of those have been done for a while. Now we get into the ones that are going on right now. The first building being that was Baptist Convention Building, which was something I looked at out of my office at City Hall for many years. Saw a big hole in the side of the building where the brick was falling apart. Built in 1924-25, this was the last downtown building designed by Mr. Clutho and is now a historic landmark. First building of its kind in the nation for a state Baptist organization. The fifth floor was added about a year after its completion. Empty for almost 30 years, the reinforced concrete structure was in desperate need of restoration. It was purchased in 2020 by JW Real Estate, which is converting it into mixed use with restaurant space, retail suites, and 24 studio and one-bedroom apartments. And that building is under construction right now. Oops, the question was, who was the architect for the rehabilitation? I don't know that. The Fire Museum, the Catholic Street Fire Museum, has a very colorful history. This is the second move that it is undergoing. In 1886, the Jacksonville City Council passed an ordinance creating a professional fire department. The department initially consisted of 3 fire stations and 17 men. Station 3, or the Catherine Street Fire Station, is located at 500 East Bay Street and manned entirely by African Americans. After fire station number 3 was disbanded in 1933, the building was used first to host the Jacksonville Fire Department shop facilities, then as a storage facility. Catherine Street Fire Station was added to the National Register on June 13, 1972, and converted to the Jacksonville Fire Museum in 1982. The building was moved to Metropolitan Park in 1994. Now it's moving back to Bay Street this year. Funny story about that building is when it was moved the first time. Nobody had ever seen a two-story historic brick building moved like that before. It was built on a solid foundation, not off-grade on piers, and Bedford being taken in one spot on Bay Street was end up as a pile of bricks. Luckily, that didn't happen, and we still have it. Laura Street Trio. Famous and infamous Laura Street Trio. This building right here, inside them, is probably the only time that I know of where the American Institute of Architects of Jacksonville held a public protest in the middle of the street. I think it was 1993. Doug Lane was our president, and Bank of America owned that building, and they were going to chip off the original cornice on one of the buildings. They were saying pieces were falling down and people were going to get hurt. And there was a whole big protest stage out there. Everybody cut up their Bank of America cards. Obviously didn't do anything because they couldn't do it anyway. Hopefully Steve Atkins is able to pull this thing off and rent the facility because these things are really gems of Jacksonville architecture. Laura Street Trio consists of 2 skyscrapers, Florida Life Building and the Bisbee Building, the old Florida National Bank, Marble Bank Building. Marble Bank was designed by architect Edwin Glidden in the classical revival style built in 1902. The Bisbee Building was constructed in 08-09 designed by Clutho in the Prairie style. The 11-story Florida Life Building, also by Clutho, 1911-12, is only one of the 3 that faced Laura Street.
After standing
vacant for years and going through several different ownership changes, the trio was bought by the city of Jacksonville in 2002, then in 2011 by the Atkins Group began renovation of the trio to include a Courtyard Marriott Hotel. Renovation on this part of it has not yet started. There's been some changes in the original plan. One of the buildings is now housing in conjunction with the Jacksonville Housing Authority, using it for some sort of a bond pass-through agency to provide funding for it. We don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but hopefully soon. Federal Reserve Building on 424 Open Street, built in 1923 by Jacksonville's first female architect, Henrietta Dozier. Federal Reserve Building is a national historic landmark. Ms. Dozier designed it in the Renaissance revival style from the Federal Reserve Bank in Jacksonville. Abandoned for more than 40 years, in 2020 began JWB Real Estate bought the building and is planning another mixed-use development, restaurants, business, and event space. The old Independent Life Building, which is in some circles being called the iLife Building. KBJ Architects designed this structure in 1955. They relocated its office in 1975 to what is now called the Wells Fargo Center. The Jacksonville Electric Authority acquired the building in 1976. JEA moved the building from this building to the University of Marion building in the 1990s. St. Augustine-based St. Augustine Development Group bought the 19-story structure in 2019 and has plans for mixed-use development. Ambassador Hotel, this is another structure that has been sitting vacant, falling literally for decades. It's now completed in 1923 for $300,000, believe it or not. It is described as Jacksonville's first big downtown apartment building. It was renamed the Ambassador Hotel in 1955 and received National Register designation in 1983. Due to its historic classification, the building, the facade of the existing structure is not being changed as it undergoes historic renovation for a La Quinta Inn by Axis Hotels. And that building is also under construction. And that concludes the program, and we want to thank you and turn it over to Alan to handle Q&A.
To the names of the members of the Historic Sites Committee up here on the screen, and a couple of them are present here today. Bill Bishop, of course, chairs that committee for us, and also with us today, Captain Scott O'Connor, Amy Palmer, and who am I missing on the Historic Sites Committee? Please give that committee a round of applause. In considering properties to be listed, they think about the historic significance for the fact